If you've got a true story that will make us laugh, gasp, or shiver, we want to hear it. And if you share it with us, you just might hear it right here on the podcast.
So this is my story that actually happened to me, and I don't tell a lot of people this because I feel like people think that I'm lying.
One time, I was coming to actually check on the house. Walk in the house, put my stuff down, and then I turn towards the living room, and I see the TV's gone and glass all over. So I did 911 calls. I won't give all the details, but we did have a call. It was a homicide, and it is a boy. He had essentially pretended to be dead.
I'm laying there, I still can't fall asleep, and all of a sudden, I look at my window, and there is someone staring right at me.
Just call our Hot Cup Cold Case voicemail at 864-MY-STORY. That's 864-697-8679. Or send us a message at hotcupcoldcasepodcast.com. Thanks for sharing your stories with us. This episode of Hot Cup Cold Case contains disturbing details about a violent crime and may not be appropriate for some listeners. I'm Brant.
I'm Rachel.
And this is Hot Cup
Cold Case,
where every couple of weeks we invite you into our apartment and share with you the two things that keep us up at night. And the first is a hot cup of caffeine, which we've got right here. And the second is a cold case. But actually, for this episode, I'll be sharing the details of a closed case that I hope Rach hasn't heard of. And then we'll end the episode with a short but strange criminal case we like to call a mugshot. But before we get to those stories, Rach and I need to decompress. We had a rough week. Rachel's parents were supposed to fly up here from Texas last weekend, and unfortunately they had to cancel their trip last minute because they were exposed to a strain of the coronavirus that actually hospitalized a friend of theirs.
Yeah, it was a very sad day for us, especially for our little girl. Her grandparents mean so much to her, and she is their entire world.
Yeah, our daughter had literally been counting down for 3 weeks. She even made a chain out of construction paper and tore off a link every day as we got closer to their arrival. And literally the day before they were supposed to be here, we had to tell her they weren't going to be able to come.
She was devastated.
They did test negative for the coronavirus, so that's good.
Yes, thank you, Lord.
But at least we have the Facebook portal, and our daughter knows how to use it. Your parents are like her best friends. She literally calls them 4 or 5 times a day.
I know, it's so cute.
Speaking of video chatting, your mom shared the funniest story with us this week, and I don't remember all the details.
So my mom was on a conference call this week for her work, and one of my mom's coworkers put on a slideshow on the Zoom call. But she didn't realize that when she started the slideshow, it didn't turn her camera off. So her camera was on the entire time.
And everyone could see her, right?
Everybody can see her. And so she puts her feet up on her desk and she pulls out a mirror and she starts tweezing her eyebrows. And then at one point she picks her nose. She must have got something on her shirt. I think she spilled water or something because she pushes herself away from the desk and goes to her kitchen and comes back and takes her shirt off on camera and adjusts her bra. And then she puts her shirt back on and all while on the camera. I think she just laughed it off because I think that's all that she could do. But I would literally die if that happened to me.
Yeah, luckily nothing like that has ever happened to us. Although I did end up shirtless on a Facebook portal call with your parents this week. Your dad was on camera without a shirt. So your mom was like, Larry, go put a shirt on. And Larry said, why do I have to put a shirt on? Brant's not wearing a shirt. And your mom was like, yes, he is. He's wearing a white shirt. When in fact, I was not wearing a white shirt. That was just my pale skin.
Yes. It's hysterical. So you got a closed case for me?
Yes, I do. If you remember on the last episode, I talked about a woman from 1922 named Frances Hall, who may or may not have murdered her husband, who was having an affair with another woman.
Yes, I remember that.
Well, the story I'm going to tell you tonight takes place almost 100 years later, and it involves another woman, also named Frances Hall, who also killed her husband, who was also having an affair. This is the case of the other Frances Hall. Bill Hall Jr. and his wife, Frances Hall, were high school sweethearts from San Antonio, Texas. Hey, just like us, except Fort Worth, Texas. They were married in the early 1980s, and over the course of the next few decades together, they raised 2 children, Nikki and Justin. And together, they also grew Bill's trucking company into a multi-million-dollar business with a fleet of more than 100 delivery trucks. By 2013, Bill, who was now 50, and Frances, who was now 55, were celebrating more than 30 years of marriage. But a lot had changed over the years, and on September 13th of 2013, Frances received a phone call that would trigger a series of unfortunate events and ultimately cost her husband his life.
Okay.
She was visiting her dying grandmother that day when, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a 28-year-old woman and a former exotic dancer named Bonnie Contreras called and introduced herself to Frances, saying, quote, "I need to talk to you about your husband. I've been having an affair with him, and we need to get together." End quote.
That has to be a call no woman ever wants to have.
Yeah, and it was completely unexpected. Frances was shocked and decided to confront her husband privately in order to shield their 2 children from the impending fallout. She said, quote, "I thought this was going to die down. Nobody has to know." End quote. So Bill was forced to admit his infidelity to Frances, and he also informed his wife that his mistress, Bonnie, not only knew about their marriage, but had actually been stalking Frances for quite some time.
Oh, that's lovely.
And it was shortly after that eerie revelation that Frances began receiving some provocative messages from Bonnie. Frances said, quote, she'd send pictures. She just bombarded me with them. Pics and a video or 2, where she and Bill were being intimate.
Oh, no.
End quote. One of the videos Bonnie sent Frances was also accompanied by a text that read, quote, "There you go, dumbass. Your hubby loves it."
Oh, Lord.
End quote. The messages continued for several weeks, during which time Bonnie also sent Frances a diagram of a hysterectomy, accompanied by a text that read, quote, "You are hollow from the inside. No wonder Bill can't be with you. You're not a real woman anymore." End quote. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, that's terrible.
It was around that time that Frances' resolve eventually broke, and she confided in her kids that their father had been in a relationship with another woman, and that his mistress had been stalking her. Then, a week later, on October 10th of 2013, after enduring weeks of harassment from a woman whom she had never met, something happened that would finally push Frances over the edge. She had just left her niece's volleyball game when she brought her black Cadillac Escalade to a stop at a traffic light on San Antonio's Loop 1604. And that's when she spotted her husband, Bill, riding through the intersection on his custom light blue Harley Davidson. And following right behind him, driving Frances' $130,000 Range Rover, was Bill's mistress, Bonnie Contreras.
Yeah, this is not gonna be good.
At that moment, Frances said, quote, "I literally pulled over and I said, 'Oh dear Lord, please, I'm gonna confront this girl. I'm done.' I was so frustrated. I wanted to confront her. I wanted her to leave me alone. I wanted her to leave my kids alone and just leave us alone." End quote. So Frances decided to call her daughter Nikki. She told her daughter, "I'm going to confront this girl." To which Nikki responded, quote, "Mom, do what you gotta do. This girl has made our life a living hell." End quote. And that's when Frances said, quote, "I make the worst choice of my life, the baddest choice of my life, and I turn around and I start chasing her." End quote. So Frances made a quick U-turn and took off after Bonnie, accelerating through traffic at speeds upwards of 80 miles per hour. She said, quote, "I get close to her and I'm telling her to pull over and she starts braking on me." End quote. Bonnie then took off in the family's Range Rover with Frances and her Cadillac Escalade in hot pursuit. The two vehicles raced through the city's busy streets as Bonnie continued braking hard with Frances right on her tail. And all the while, the local San Antonio PD was receiving reports of the dangerous high-speed chase from other drivers on the road. One caller said, quote, "I've got a black Escalade and a Range Rover passing people on the wrong side of the road on 1604 going towards Highway 90. They're traveling at a high rate of speed. I don't know, 90, 100 miles per hour, acting like idiots." End quote.
Yeah, that's definitely what it sounds like.
Yeah, I would have called 911 too.
Yeah, absolutely. Very selfish behavior.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen while driving, Rach?
I remember one time I was in Texas, someone was mad. I guess I wasn't going fast enough in the left lane, and they pulled up beside me in the right lane, and it looked like they had a grenade in their hand.
A grenade?
Yeah, I remember that.
You have never told me this story.
Yeah, I don't remember how old I was, but I called the cops.
What made you think it was a grenade?
Because it looked like a grenade.
Is that what you told the cops?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
That reminds me of the time your mother scared someone on the highway.
Oh, God.
Because she had something in her hand that they thought was a gun.
She was on her way to work, and the highway was like shut down. No one was moving. She hadn't moved in at least 30 minutes, and everyone had their cars shut off. And someone like started honking at her as if she could move. My mom, she's scrappy. She decided she was tired of this lady. So she got out of the car to go talk to her. And my mom was like, "Get out of the car. Let's talk about this." And the lady like wouldn't look at her. So my mom goes back to her car and decides, we still are not moving. So I'm going to walk across the highway, like off of an exit, and I'm going to go get some coffee. So she grabs her wallet and gets out of the car. And the lady thinks her black wallet has to be a gun. And the lady like freaked out. So she takes off down like this grassy embankment, and she had to have ruined her car because she's going over like curbs and...
She thought she was fleeing for her life.
Yes, absolutely. So somewhere someone is telling a very similar story about this crazy woman.
Well, I also asked those of you who follow us on social media about some of the craziest things you've ever seen while driving. And I got some interesting responses. April in Houston said, quote, "I live in Houston. People in traffic are crazy. I had a man start masturbating in the car next to me as a teen.
That's
He
disgusting.
kept following me until I pulled into a police substation. It was so scary." End quote.
That's disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself.
That is incredibly creepy. Another one of our Patreon subscribers said, quote, "I was in my late teens, driving with a few friends, coming out of the tunnel from Canada. I guess I cut another car off." Shrug emoji. The car, a bunch of teenagers as well, chased me down I-94. The passenger was hanging out of his window, swinging a golf club at my car. I believe the gentleman also threw a tube of hair gel that exploded on my front windshield.
Oh my gosh.
This is all happening while we're doing at least 70 miles per hour down the freeway. He finally gave up, but wow, what a ride. End quote.
Brant, you used to work with someone who had to go to anger management, right? Because they would keep a cup of nuts and bolts in their center console, and if someone ticked them off, they would just throw them out the window at their windshield.
Yeah, that's true.
That's crazy.
That's some premeditated craziness.
Yeah, people be crazy. Okay, so tell me, what happens with Frances?
Okay, so Frances and Bonnie's erratic driving had finally caught the attention of Bill, who had quickly maneuvered his motorcycle to the shoulder of the road where he could slow down and get his wife's attention. Frances said, quote, "I noticed up ahead of me, Bill's already starting to pull over on the shoulder. And you have to understand, the roads that we live, they're country roads, and it's a narrow shoulder road. It's got a little bit of gravel, and I see him ahead while she's still braking, and I see that the bike's moving over. So in my mind, he's pulling over, and she's still braking on me. And as I get to passing Bill on the shoulder, I look over and I saw him. And as I turned back around, she just braked. And I lost control. I jerked to turn and I heard something." End quote.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that sound that Frances heard was her rear passenger window suddenly shattering to pieces. She said, quote, "I thought it was, with all the commotion, my purse flew to the front. I had a 125-pound piece of granite in the back of the SUV." End quote. But it wasn't Frances' purse or the large slab of granite in her back seat that had shattered her vehicle's window.
Oh, no.
It was her husband, Bill.
Oh, my gosh.
More 911 calls continued to pour into the San Antonio PD, including this one.
Bear County 911, what is your location?
1604 right past Medina River.
Okay, what's going on?
I just saw Escalade sideswipe motorcycle and the man needs medical attention immediately.
And it's for the motorcycle rider, correct?
Yes, the motorcycle driver.
And it was what color was the Escalade?
Black. It was black. They turned around and there was another, I think it was a Land Rover. They were chasing each other, and he made a U-turn and headed back towards 90.
Were you able to get a license plate off of either?
No, they were going too fast.
Okay.
Can you get somebody out here real quick?
Yeah, I've got someone coming out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One woman even thought the Escalade's window had been shattered by gunfire. Listen to this call.
Bear County 911, what is your location?
1604.
1604, and what location?
I'm sorry, I'm just calling to report, someone shot through the window.
Ma'am, I'm having a difficult time hearing you, ma'am.
I'm on 1604 Southwest.
Uh-huh. And?
Two black Cadillac SUVs driving recklessly. One of the vehicles
has the back window shot out?
Yes.
Can you see the license plate on that vehicle?
Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? There was a wreck out here. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's some cops here already.
Yeah, we need that. We need the license plate on that vehicle.
I just passed it up. I'm sorry. But the Cadillac just stopped here. She stopped right in front of the cop.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. She stopped. Someone's there to help already.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Meanwhile, neither Frances nor Bonnie even stopped to see if Bill was okay. But instead, the two vengeful women continued racing through the crowded city until Frances finally lost track of her husband's paramour. She did eventually find her way back to the scene of the collision, where she not only found her husband still lying on the side of the road, but Bonnie talking with police. Frances said, quote, "I saw the sheriffs, I saw a bunch of people, and I was like, what is going on? And as I parked the car, I left my keys in there, and I ran straight to Bill. As a matter of fact, one of the sheriffs grabbed me, and I kind of yanked him back. Bill was lying on the floor. My sister had his head in between her thighs, trying to keep him still. He was talking. He was alert." Yeah, her sister was there.
How did her sister get there?
That's how long it took for her to come back to the scene.
What?
Yeah, Frances said, quote, "Bill said that he was so sorry, that he couldn't breathe. He kept yanking the face mask off of him. Air Life gets there, and I begged them if I could go with him, and they said no. They take off, and my intention was to get in my car and go straight to the hospital," end quote. But that's when the sheriff, who had been speaking with Bonnie, informed Frances that she was under arrest.
Yeah, I definitely saw that coming.
Frances was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, but while in police custody, Frances not only learned that Bill had died from his injuries while at the hospital, but that her charges would now include murder. So the trial didn't begin until 3 years later, on August 30th of 2016, and the courtroom was packed. District Judge Jefferson Moore said he had to do something that he's never had to do before or since. He said, quote, "I have a duty to the public to provide a public trial. We were so crowded, I had to declare the hallway as part of the courtroom so the public could watch," end quote. Judge Moore then directed the deputies present to keep the area quiet. So first came the prosecution, and they solicited testimony from Bonnie Contreras, who stated that her affair with Bill Hall had actually played out for the last 3 years of his marriage to Frances. During that time, Bill had lavished Bonnie with extravagant gifts, including a rental house, vacations, and a breast augmentation. In fact, Bonnie, who was unemployed at the time, testified that she hadn't worked for years because from the moment her affair with Bill began, he had expressed that he didn't want her to. Bonnie also revealed when she first became aware of Bill's marriage to Frances. She said, quote, I had never seen a ring on his finger. I had never even seen ways where he would pull off a ring or had a tan, end quote. But only a few weeks into their relationship, Bonnie said, quote, I was at Scusi's, which is an Italian restaurant. I remember we had ordered our food and I finally asked him and I said, I don't want to come off strong or, bitchy or like I'm in your business or anything, but are you married? Because I don't go out with married men, end quote. Bonnie said Bill told her, quote, yes, I'm married, I'm going through a divorce, and I'm separated. To which Bonnie responded, oh, okay, I didn't want to get into his business. I didn't want to keep asking him more questions because to me, that was none of my business, end quote.
Okay, you're sleeping with a married man. It's your business.
Yeah, you don't want to get into his business, but you're going to let him into your business?
Okay, Brant.
Sorry, I got a little sassy there.
She had no problem being lavish with gifts and everything else. No, I don't like it.
Well, I searched online and I actually found the Italian restaurant called Scusi's, where Bill and Bonnie would often meet for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, it's actually located on San Antonio's Loop 1604. So the place where Bill often met with his mistress was the very same stretch of road that he would later lose his life on.
Mm-mm.
How weird is that? And you know how I love reviews?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this restaurant received mostly 5-star reviews, but there was one review that I just had to share. And it's a 1-star review from Maria DeWitt. And she said, quote, a good friend wanted to take me someplace nice last evening. As we sat at the bar, it took a long time for us to be served. As we waited patiently, we received our drinks. Then we saw a guy come back to the bar with 2 drinks in hand, place them on the back counter, and drink from both glasses.
Gross.
He then poured the drinks in a shaker, added liquor, and reserved the same drinks that he leaned over and drank out of.
That's disgusting.
This guy had full facial hair. His nose was over the drinks. Anything could have fallen in those drinks.
Ew, that's so gross.
She went on to say, as a medical professional, I was appalled. I could not believe what I had witnessed. My friend asked the guy for the manager, and he replied, I am the manager.
Oh, no. No. Oh, it's disgusting.
Isn't that crazy? Well, back to the trial. So Bonnie gave the jury her version of the events that transpired 3 years earlier on Loop 1604. She said, quote, we came to the stoplight, and Bill's like, roll your window down. So I rolled my window down. And my cousin was on the speakerphone, and Bill goes, I love you so much, Gorda. He goes, I'm so happy. And I said, I love you too, hun. And then the light turned green, and that was the last time I heard his voice, end quote. Next, Bonnie testified that during the high-speed chase that followed, Frances had rammed her Cadillac Escalade into the rear end of the family's Range Rover at least a dozen times, which caused Bonnie to veer into oncoming traffic. The prosecutors then solicited supporting testimony from Tim Lovett, a collision reconstruction expert, who stated that he believed the Range Rover's rear end did show signs of multiple collisions. And finally, the prosecution aimed to prove that Frances' actions the day of her husband's death were actually premeditated and with murderous intent. They informed the jury that Bill Hall had actually filed for a divorce earlier that week before moving out entirely. Then they presented a voicemail recording that Bonnie had received while the high-speed pursuit was unfolding, and it was a message from the Hall's daughter, Nikki, whom you may remember Frances had called right before the ensuing chase.
Right.
In the message, Nikki told her father's mistress, quote, told you to watch your back, you fucking stupid slut, end quote. Nikki later stated, quote, that voicemail just really haunted us because they wanted to use that as some sort of motive. I was angry. I was upset. Bonnie had been sending my mom pictures, ugly, disturbing text messages, taunting her. So I was just over it. I was so fed up with her doing this to my family, and I left that voicemail. That's something I should have never done, but I did it, and the state used it against my mom, end quote. Next, Frances' defense attorney, Lee Cutter, had her chance to cross-examine Bonnie and asked her, quote, when did you find out that Bill had lied to you about going through a divorce? And Bonnie answered, he never lied to me. So Lee followed up with the question, did you do any looking into it? Did you Google it? Look into public records? And Bonnie said, no, it was none of my business, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when Lee introduced evidence that Bonnie had, in fact, looked up Frances online and even harassed her.
Well, obviously, yeah, she was stalking her.
Right. Lee presented the jury with all of those explicit messages Bonnie had sent, including a photograph Francis had received from Bill's mistress just days before his death of both he and Bonnie having sex. Bonnie had also tormented Francis with pictures of her naked body, along with messages that read, quote, "Look at this, you rotten, hollow bitch," end quote. Francis' younger brother, Jose, also testified and told the court that Bill and his wife had, quote, gone to Corpus to get away from the situation and that Bonnie wouldn't leave them alone, end quote. Then came Francis' turn to testify. She began by stating that she was completely unaware of her husband's affair until the day Bonnie called to inform her of their relationship. Francis' brother, Jose, again gave supporting testimony that he had only learned of the affair from Francis just 3 weeks prior to Bill's death. He also said he wasn't surprised by the news because this wasn't the first time Bill had cheated on his wife. Through sobs, Francis recounted the events leading up to her husband's death and claimed that she never rammed Bonnie into oncoming traffic. According to Francis, she was aggressively demanding her husband's mistress pull over when Bonnie began repeatedly slamming on the Range Rover's brakes and forcing Francis to veer off course. She said at one point she felt her vehicle shake and noticed her rear window had been shattered, but didn't realize that her husband had been fatally thrown from his motorcycle and continued driving down the road. Her emotional account of that moment was so powerful and moving that some of the jurors even wept during her testimony. Of course, the prosecution didn't buy it, and Bonnie later said, quote, she had just hit her husband, a man that she claims to be in love with, that she's in love with, that will always be the love of her life, but yet you didn't stop and see if he's dead or alive, end quote. Well, the defense also consulted their own collision reconstruction expert, Charles Rubel, who recreated the crash with toy cars in the courtroom. Charles told the court he believed Bonnie was lying about being rammed from behind. When asked, did anything from the mistress's testimony and recollection of these events comport with the physical evidence that you analyzed and looked at? Rubel said, quote, no. Impact with cycle? No. Impact from the rear 15 times? No. Impact hard enough to get shoved into oncoming traffic? No. End quote. A couple months after it began, the trial finally reached its end in September of 2016. And when both sides had finally concluded their closing arguments, the time came for the jury to consider their verdict. But before releasing the jury to deliberate, Judge Moore made a highly controversial decision and announced that he would allow them to consider quote-unquote sudden passion as a cause for Francis's actions. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term sudden passion, the Texas Penal Code defines sudden passion as, quote, directly caused by and arising out of provocation by the individual killed or another acting with the person killed, which passion arises at the time of the offense and is not solely the result of former provocation, end quote. So that meant that any potential guilty verdict would come with a lower sentence, from 5 years to life in prison, down to only 2 to 20 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Through tears, the jury announced their verdict, finding Francis Hall guilty of murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Francis attorney Lee Cutter said, to see the jury, quote, physically and emotionally moved and crying and visibly upset to find her guilty, it was very powerful, end quote. And then came Francis' sentencing hearing, where she was given no more than 2 years in prison.
Yeah.
Another one of Francis' attorneys, Alan Brown, said, quote, to me, it was an accident. She should have never gone to prison at all. There was no criminal intent, end quote.
Well, I definitely don't understand why just she went to prison. I feel like both of them should have went to prison.
A lot of people feel that way. And Elizabeth Zavala, a reporter for the San Antonio Express News who covered the trial, said, quote, even in the walls of the Bexar County Courthouse, I could not find a woman who didn't say to me, I would have done the same thing, or I would have done much worse. And the men pretty much across the board were like, when was the last time a man was able to get a quote-unquote sudden passion defense for killing his wife, end quote.
Well,
yeah, it was a highly controversial case. And after the trial, Bonnie sued the Hall family for $2.5 million, alleging emotional distress as a result of the chase.
Gosh.
The same woman who psychologically tormented her lover's wife.
Yeah, she definitely ain't innocent.
But the Hall family was busy fighting each other in court. Bill Hall had died without a will, meaning his share of the estate actually passed to his wife Frances. Their son Justin tried to have control of his father's estate relinquished to him, arguing that his mother shouldn't financially benefit from her criminal actions. But with Frances behind bars, Nikki actually became the independent administrator, and soon, 2 of Bill's trucking companies had careened into bankruptcy.
Oh.
Justin's lawyer, Mark Braswell, stated that Nikki had ruined her father's business by selling off assets and dwindling their family's share from $7.7 million down to $1.7 million.
Ooh, that's not good.
And then there was the issue of Bill's life insurance policy. You remember how Frances' younger brother Jose testified in court that he wasn't surprised to learn of Bill's affair because Bill had actually cheated on Frances before?
Right.
Well, other members of the Hall's extended family tried to lay claim to some of the insurance policy's payout, alleging that Bill had another heir, a child he had fathered 30 years earlier with his cousin's wife. Well, 2 years later, on September 7th of 2018, Frances Hall finally finished serving her prison sentence and returned home. And just a few months ago, actually, she appeared on the Dr. Oz show, along with her daughter, Nikki. You can actually find clips on YouTube, but I'll give you some of the highlights. Frances said, quote, "I want people to know that I'm not this horrendous person. Did I murder my husband? No. I can't even bring myself to saying that word. Did I go after Bonnie and want to confront her? Yes, and that I regret for the rest of my life." End quote. And still choking back tears, she went on to say, quote, "My intentions were never to divorce Bill. I loved this man. I'd been with this man since I was 16 years old, the love of my life, the man I'm supposed to grow old with. When you love somebody unconditionally, through good, through bad, I'm going to be there with him." End quote. Ugh. And Dr. Oz asked her about her relationship with her son, Justin. Frances had this to say, quote, "We get along so much better. We've kind of come full circle. Me, him, and Nikki. I mean, it's been hard, but we're working on it. I have to assume as a parent, he was going through a hard time too. And I think with me going to prison, it just made everything so much worse." End quote. And that is the story of the other Frances Hall.
Yes, that is just a hot mess.
And now, a brief message from our sponsors. And by sponsors, I mean our Patreon subscribers.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I subscribe to Hot Cup Cold Case Patreon because I like true crime and I love the way Brant and Rachel tell their stories. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've never heard one as captivating and suspenseful as Hot Cup Cold Case. So thank you for all that you do.
Aw, Emily, we are beyond grateful for you. And for those of you who are thinking, wow, now I want to subscribe to the Patreon and be just like Emily, just visit hotcupcoldcasepodcast.com and click on the link for our Patreon. As a subscriber, you'll also receive exclusive access to all of our Red Eye episodes, true stories with an extra shot of strange. Thanks for your support. We couldn't do this without you.
So this week, Brant took away my opportunity to do a mugshot because he was so excited to share his.
This mugshot story is nuts.
I'm ready.
Well, in 2019, a middle-aged couple from Natick, Massachusetts, who serve as editors and publishers for an online newsletter that focuses on e-commerce businesses like eBay, published a critical review of the Fortune 500 company. Shortly after that, the couple began receiving some alarming packages in their mail, including a bloody pig mask, a box of live cockroaches,
Gross.
fly larvae,
Ew.
live spiders,
Mm-mm.
a book of advice on how to survive the death of your spouse,
Oh, gosh.
and a funeral wreath.
What is happening?
The couple had no idea, but they eventually alerted detectives who notified eBay that there was reason to believe some of their employees may be involved. The company responded with their full cooperation, and in August of last year, 2019, they launched an internal investigation into the affairs of their personnel. That investigation is actually still active and ongoing as of right now, but so far, detectives have uncovered a conspiracy involving 6 eBay executives and senior managers.
What?
Who worked together to intimidate the Natick couple for their critical review of the company. Those conspirators include James Bao, eBay's Director of Safety and Security, David Harville, eBay's director of global resiliency, and a bunch of senior managers, intelligence analysts, and a former police captain.
Wait, what did this couple do?
They just posted a negative review, like that 1-star review of Scoozy's.
That's it?
Well, they published their review in their newsletter, and it was a very popular newsletter.
I am leaving no bad reviews ever again.
At least not about eBay.
Everything gets a 5-star from here on out.
So they have all been charged with conspiracy to commit cyberstalking and conspiracy to tamper with witnesses. In the course of their investigation, detectives discovered that a couple of eBay's executives followed the Natick couple's online newsletter and sent messages to each other saying it was time to, quote, take down the editor and crush this lady, end quote.
Do you not have enough to do as the senior executive?
Well, according to prosecutors, the cyberstalking campaign not only involved mailing those anonymous packages to the Natick couple's residence, but also mailing pornography in the couple's name to the couple's neighbors.
That's ridiculous.
The eBay executives even posted a classified ad on Craigslist under the couple's name, which invited, quote, singles, couples, and swingers to come party at their house anytime, day or night.
Oh my gosh.
Quote. Isn't that wild?
It's still going right now?
The investigation is still ongoing, so the conspiracy may be larger.
That's ridiculous.
Well, that's it for this episode. Just a reminder, we love reading your stories. Stories from our listeners about some of your most frightening experiences, or maybe even just some of your most embarrassing moments. So if you have a story we could share on the podcast, please send it to us at hotcupcoldcasepodcast.com.
And even if you don't have a story, please share the podcast with your friends and encourage them to listen too. The more listeners we have, the more stories we can collect and share with you.
Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and other streaming services. The more 5-star ratings and reviews we receive, the easier it becomes for more people to find us in their podcast directories.
And finally, for even more things to keep you up at night, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hot Cup Cold Case Podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Hot Cup Cold Case is written and produced by Rachel and myself, with music by Young Kool-Aid.
If you ever need your mug filled
or your spine chilled,
this is Hot Cup
Cold Case. Well, speaking of embarrassing moments, you had a rather embarrassing moment this week, Rach.
We're not talking about that. No.
Babe, it's okay. It could have happened to anyone.
No, we're not talking about the story. We're not. It's inappropriate.
Come on, babe, please.
No, I've told you. No.
It's really okay.
It's not okay.
Fine.